This had been adopted by the Americans almost 2 years earlier. 56. Admiral Koga survived slightly less than a year as the Commander-in-Chief of Combined Fleet. In March 1944, while en route to the Philippines from Palau, his plane disappeared in a storm. Koga's Chief of Staff Admiral Shigeru Fukudo had also left Palau on a separate plane and flew into the same storm. His plane crashed near Cebu, and he was captured by Filipino guerrillas with his documents seized. Although the guerrillas were quickly forced to give up their prisoner, the documents and its coding system found their way to Allied intelligence via an American submarine. 56. After recovering Fukudo, the Japanese realized that their planned operations were compromised and they needed a new one. Admiral Shigetaro Shimada, the chief of the naval staff in Tokyo, immediately began preparing a new plan, which was based on a preliminary draft by Admiral Koga. The plan became known as AGO. AGO envisioned a decisive fleet action, where the areas for the decisive battle were deemed to be the Palaus and the Western Carolines. 56. It was in these areas that the mobile fleet, along with large numbers of land-based aircraft, would be concentrated. If the Americans attacked the Marianas, they would be attacked by land-based. Planes in that vicinity. Then the Americans would be lured into the areas where the mobile fleet could fake them. 56. A month after Koga's death, Admiral Soemu Toyoda became the new commander of Combined Fleet. 56. Philippine Sea. Map depicting the Battle of the Philippine Sea. An opportunity for a decisive battle came in June 1944, when the Americans landed on Saipan in the Marianas. The Japanese responded with their largest carrier force of the war, the 9-carrier mobile fleet led by Shikoku, Zukaku, and the new armored deck aircraft carrier Tai. The resulting clash, the largest carrier battle in history, did not turn out as the Japanese had hoped. Instead, it ended in near total defeat and the virtual end of their carrier force. 57. On the 19th of June, a series of Japanese carrier airstrikes were shattered by strong American defenses. The same day Shikoku was hit by 4 torpedoes from the submarine Kavala and sunk with heavy loss of life. The Tai was also sunk due to a single torpedo hit from the submarine Albacore. Late the next day, the Japanese were subjected to American carrier air attack, suffering the loss of several ships, including the carrier He. 55. The 4 Japanese airstrikes had involved 373 carrier aircraft, of which only 130 returned. 58. More aircraft and their crews were lost when Tai and Shikoku were sunk by American submarines. After the second day of the battle, Japanese losses were 3,000 dead, 3 carriers, 2 fleet oilers, more than 400 carrier aircraft, and around 200 land-based aircraft, plus damage to several ships. The Americans lost 109 dead, 123 aircraft, 80 of which ran out of fuel returning from the strike on the Japanese fleet, and bomb damage to the battleship South Dakota. Although this defeat was severe in terms of the loss of the fleet carriers Tai, Shikoku, and He, the real disaster was the annihilation of the carrier air groups. 59. These losses to the already outnumbered Japanese were irreplaceable. The Japanese had spent the better part of a year reconstituting their carrier air groups. The Americans destroyed 90% of that air power in 2 days, leaving the Japanese with only enough aircrew to form an air group for 1 light carrier, returning home with 35 of about 450 aircraft with mobile fleet had begun the battle. 55. Demise of the Imperial Japanese Navy, 1944-1945. Lit Gulf. Even after the disaster at Philippine Sea, the IJN was still a formidable force. Of the 12 battleships that were available at the beginning of the war in 1941-42, 9 still remained operational, together with 14 out of the original 18 heavy cruisers. 55. However, efforts to rebuild the carrier force were unsuccessful since their training given to new aviators was of a very low standard. Consequently, the new UNRI carriers never went to sea with a full air group. This left the Japanese with a ragtag collection of carriers, led by the Zukaku, which was the sole survivor of the Pearl Harbor attack force. The Japanese were left with two choices, either to commit their remaining strength in an all-out offensive, or to sit by while the Americans occupied the Philippines and cut the sea lanes between Japan and vital resources from the Dutch east. Japanese battleships at anchor in Brunei, Indies and Malaya. The plan devised by the Japanese was a final attempt to create a decisive battle by utilizing their last remaining strength, the firepower of its heavy cruisers and battleships, which were to be all committed against the American beachhead at Lit. The Japanese planned to use their remaining carriers as bait, in order to lure the American carriers away from Lit Gulf Longina for the heavy warships to enter and destroy any American ships present. The Japanese assembled a force totaling 4 carriers, 9 battleships, 13 heavy cruisers, 7 light cruisers, and 35 destroyers. 60. The main center force would pass through the San Bernardino Strait into the Philippine Sea, turn southwards, and then take the landing area. 2 separate groups of the southern force would strike at the landing area through Surigao Strait, while the northern force with the Japanese carriers was to lure the main American covering forces away from Lit. 60. However, the carriers only embarked just over 100 aircraft, the equal to those on a single American fleet carrier. The Japanese were risking annihilation. The situation in 1944 revealed the weakness of the IJN. After departing from Brunei Bay on the 20th of October, the center force was attacked by 2 American submarines, which resulted in the loss of 2 heavy cruisers with another crippled. On the night of the 24th of October, 1925, the southern force, consisting of the 2 first-class battleships escorted by a heavy cruiser and 4 destroyers, attempted to enter Lit Gulf from the south through Surigao Strait. This action was fought at night, where an American force of 6 battleships, 8 cruisers, 28 destroyers, and 39 PT boats ambushed the Japanese. 61. Utilizing radar-guided torpedo attacks, American destroyers sank 1 of the battleships and 3 destroyers while damaging the other battleship. Naval gunfire finished off the 2nd battleship and the heavy cruiser, with only a single Japanese destroyer surviving. Another group, part of the southern force, built around 2 heavy cruisers, failed to coordinate its movements with the first and subsequently arrived at Surigao Strait in the middle of the encounter, made a haphazard torpedo attack, and retreated. 61. That day, after entering the Sibuyan Sea, the center force was assaulted by American carrier aircraft throughout the whole day, leaving another heavy cruiser forced to retire. The Americans then targeted the Musashi and sank it under a barrage of torpedo and bomb hits. Many other ships of the center force re-attacked, but continued on. 60. Convinced that their attacks had made the center force ineffective, the American carriers headed north to address the newly detected threat of the Japanese carriers. Off Cape Ingano, the Americans launched over 500 aircraft sorties at the Japanese force, followed up by a surface group of cruisers and destroyers. All 4 Japanese carriers were sunk, but this part of the Lit plan succeeded in drawing the American carriers away from Lit Gulf. 61. On the 25th of October, The final major surface action fought between the Japanese and the Americans' fleets during the war occurred off Samar when the center force fell upon a group of American escort carriers escorted by only destroyers and destroyer escorts. Both sides were surprised, but the outcome looked certain since the Japanese had 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, and 2 light cruisers leading 2 destroyer squadrons. However, they did not press home their advantage, and were content to conduct a largely indecisive gunnery duel before breaking off. In exchange for the loss of 3 heavy cruisers, center force sank a single escort carrier and 3 escorts. Losses were extremely heavy with 4 carriers, 3 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 4 light cruisers and 11 destroyers sunk. This represented a total of 305,452 tons or 13.22% of their total Japanese warship tonnage losses during the war. 62. After Lit Gulf, the IJN was finished as an effective force. At the end of battle, the IJN was left with 6 battleships: Hyuga, Ise, Nagato, Haruna, Kongo and Yamato, 5 fleet carriers: Junio, Shinano, never operational, Omegai, Katsuragi and the Unryu, the light carrier Ryuho, the escort carriers Kaiyo and Shinio. The crippled Haruna in cure. After an attack by Allied aircraft on July 24, the training carrier Hosho, 8 heavy cruisers Aoba, Ashigara, Haguro Myoko, Nashi, Takao, Kumano and Tone, 9 light cruisers Kitakami, Kaiso Isuzu, Kashima, Kashiai, Yahazi, Seikora, Oyodo and the Yasushima, and some 20 destroyers plus escorts, minesweepers, and patrol vessels. 63. Last sortie. American forces landed on Okinawa on April 1. The Imperial General Headquarters decided to use every available resource to dislodge the enemy. 64. A force, called Tengo, consisting of the battleship Yamato, the light cruiser Yahazi and 8 destroyers, the Isakars, Hamakes, Yukikars, Azushimo, Kasumi Hatsushimo, Fuyuzuki, Suzutsuki, was assembled. Under the command of Vice Admiral Stachiit, the force was to be used as bait to draw away as many American carrier aircraft as possible, in order to leave Allied naval forces off Okinawa vulnerable against large-scale kamikaze attacks. 64. The Japanese were short of fuel, consequently the Yamato had only enough to reach Okinawa. Off Okinawa, it was planned to beach the battleship and use her 18.1 inches, 46 centimeters, guns to support the fighting on the island. 64. Many off-captains of the ships were opposed to the operation, preferring to be set loose as sea raiders. 64. The force departed Tokuima on April 6 at 16 o'clock. At 4 on April 7, the Japanese force passed the Sumi Peninsula into the open ocean heading south from Kysh. The force had defensive formation, with Yahazi leading Yamato and the 8 destroyers deployed in a ring around the 2 larger ships, with each ship 1,500 m, 1,600 yard, from each other and proceeding at 20 km, 23 miles per hour, 37 kilometers per hour. At 9 o'clock, the destroyer Azushimo developed engine trouble and dropped out of line. 64. At 11:15 the force turned southwest towards Okinawa. However, 15 minutes later the Japanese were sighted by American reconnaissance aircraft. All catapult aircraft on board the warships were ordered back to Kysh. 64. At 12:32 some 175 miles, 282 kilometers, south of Kysh, the force was attacked by large numbers of American carrier aircraft. The waves of aircraft were continuous. 65. The Yahazi, Hamakes, and Isacars were battered by torpedoes and bombs and were sunk. The Yamato suffered heavy damage and by 1405 she started to list. A final torpedo forced the ship to list further and caused an explosion which sent smoke billowing upwards and sank her. 65. Asashimo fell behind and was also sunk. 4 destroyers, Fuyuzuki, Sazutsuki, Yukikaze and Hatsushimo managed to return to Sasebo. 65. A total of 3,665 men were lost. NB4, warships. Battleships. Heaviest warship steaming on the sea. Yamato, the heaviest.